Spiritual lessons of negotiation games. On this episode of Board Game Faith, the bi-weekly podcast exploring the intersection of religion, spirituality, and board games. My name is Daniel Hilty.
My name is Kevin Taylor.
And welcome to you, our wonderful listeners, to this episode of Board Game Faith. It is a joy to have you here today. And Kevin, it's a joy to get to talk with you and to see you. How you doing?
Absolutely, Daniel. Good. How are you?
We're doing well. Thank you. As you know, we're in the middle of moving houses here. So
The worst.
the walls are getting bare and a lot of boxes around, but we're doing well. Thank you. And I'm glad you all are doing well too. So today, Kevin, we are talking about spiritual lessons of negotiation. And negotiation right now is kind of in the news, at least as of the date of this recording of this podcast. The United States President Biden is over in Ireland to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, which was a long negotiated and heavily negotiated set of agreements to end the troubles in Northern Ireland 25 years ago. And
Wow.
so negotiation is certainly in the headlines right now, but to a much lesser extent and much less important, of course. Negotiation is also a mechanism that we encounter in board games. So maybe we thought a good place to get started with the episode is just to talk about what is a negotiation board game, if maybe some of our listeners are less familiar with that. Kevin, do you have any thoughts on what's a negotiation board game?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know many games that are only that. I know it where they use a mechanism, and one in particular is Sellers of Catan, some people call it. Who the creator just died very sadly.
Yes,
And that is just such an important game in the history of board gaming. But in Sellers of Catan, there is a bit where you can trade resources and you can set price. You know, I have 2 coal and I really want 2 wood, and you have, and that seems like it'd be fair, 2 for 2, but maybe I could get 3 wood out of it, or you only have 1 wood. And I'm looking, and I don't think you need the coal, but maybe you're going to do something amazing with it and get more points. So it creates that dynamic of trying to get what you want and trying to figure out what the other person wants. And of course, getting a good deal is always important in a game where you win by.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What about you? What are some negotiation games you think of?
That's a great, Catan's a great example. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, one of, suppose I think one of our favorites in the house is Bonanza.
Right.
Yeah, that great classic bean farmer trading card game. In fact, I would say it's probably, arguably, the most popular bean farmer trading card game that's out there.
Now, hang on, Daniel. Let's not exaggerate. We're known
mean,
for our credible claims.
That's true. There are many contenders in the bean farming trading card category. No, there aren't, but Bonanza is great, and I'm actually going to get into that maybe a little bit later on why I like it so much. But there's a really interesting negotiation part of that game, kind of like you were saying with Catan. You know, it's kind of you can trade essentially whatever you want. We love Bonanza, but it has created a lot of some family fights too when all 4 of us get together, because sometimes you try to negotiate some good deals and sometimes they're not so good for everyone around the table.
Because you want to get what you want and you don't want to benefit the other person too much or you lose.
That's right.
But you still have to strike a balance. Yeah. Bonanza is another game where the negotiation is just part of it.
Right.
Because really you win with the set. You're trying to collect sets of things, but in order to do that, you really have to negotiate.
I think almost a pure, as close as I can think of to a pure negotiation game, or maybe 80-90% of it is negotiation, is Chinatown, which is a game that is much loved by the Shut Up and Sit Down podcast. And that is just, you get some randomly distributed resources at various points in the game. But otherwise, it's just all negotiation. You're just trying to
Huh, and
negotiate.
is it fun? I've never played it.
It is fun. It is fun. And it also can be, it can create tensions too, because, depending on
Right.
how hard of a deal you want to try to negotiate. And then the last one that comes to my mind that I think of is New York Slice, which is this game, a mechanism called I Split You Choose, which is kind of a sub mechanism of negotiation games, but it's what you do with your kids when there's maybe just a little bit of cake left, and you've got two
Ah,
children, and you say, okay, one of you can cut the cake, and the other one gets to pick,
mhm.
which slice. So anyway, those are a few more that.
And what I would add as well, as we're talking,
Yeah.
Twilight Imperium has some really, you can trade a lot of stuff kind of at any time. I think that you're limited to in some ways, but one of the cool bits is in those negotiations, you have some promissory notes. So you get someone and it gives them a power over you. So, okay, I will give you this money in exchange for this note, which says, if I ever attack you, I will lose a victory point
Okay.
type thing. So it's a way of, you're negotiating something now, but it also has influence later in the game.
How binding are those? Because I know you love
They're
Twilight
absolutely
Imperium.
binding. If
They're
you
absolutely
attack me,
binding.
you lose the point.
Okay.
Then I give you the note back. Like it's on one time thing, but it's forever. And then you could trade it with someone else. Like once you have
Okay.
it, like
I
I don't
see.
mind giving it to you. I didn't intend to give it to Ralphie. And then you're like, hey, Ralphie, I got his note. You want to give me some money for it? And now I can't attack Ralph without losing a point, which means I can't win. So there's various ones, or there's one where it's a really interesting bit where it's kind of like an IOU for something in the game.
Yeah.
So it's
That's
encouraging that kind of sort of rabble rousing, but you don't have to do any of that. You don't have to trade the notes at all if you don't want to. Unlike say Bonanza, where you have to trade to win, like you're not going to get it just by drawing cards.
right. I was wondering if Twilight Imperium 4 would come up for you, because I know you've talked before about how much you love the
I need to get
negotiating
it out
aspects of that
again.
game, and
Such a beast, but it just casts a spell over the table, and I love that kind of thing.
Yeah. The magic circle.
The magic circle, yeah. And people complain about table hogs, and I'm like, this is awesome, right? Like, there's magic circles filling up my room.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And you had did you also mention the prisoner's dilemma as an example of these games
that's one
too?
way to think of negotiation. And the prisoner's dilemma is kind of, I think it came out of philosophy of a moral about making moral rational choices, but it's a scenario, a sort of a mind thought experiment where two people have been arrested and they're in solitary, like the confinement, they can't talk to each other, and the police don't have good proof for their arrest. So what they want each of them to rat on the other person, to turn them in for a better deal. So the main charge is, if the police had evidence, you would get 10 years in prison. And the police are going to sentence you to 2 years in prison on a lesser charge, unless you agree to turn in kind of the other person. And if you do, you'll be free, and the other person has to serve the entire sentence.
Okay.
So but the problem is you don't know what the other person's going to do. And if you both turn in the other person, you each get 5 years. If no one turns anyone in, you get 2 years. And if you turn in the other person and they don't turn you in, you get free and they get 5 years. And so what do you think the most logical negotiation choice is, Daniel? 0, 2, 5, or 10?
I feel overwhelmed by the options.
I mean, part of
What
it
are
is
the-
knowing the psychology of the
I think that's why I'm so bad at negotiation games. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to kind of anticipate what a person's going to do.
It's built on trust. I mean, it's so much an exercise in
Built on
trust.
trust.
Yeah.
Or, well, it is. And so I think the logical answer usually as it's presented is you would neither turn the other person in because that gives you the best deal that you each will get only 2-year sentence.
Right.
So but that's predicated on the other person seeing the scenario the same way.
Right.
So you're hoping that they're rational and they would also not make any kind of that they wouldn't turn you in.
But you can't assume the other person
is
going to act rationally. Yeah. Now that's a great example.
So
too.
it's in a way it's not, and I guess in a way it's a question of negotiation in your own mind.
Right. And it does bring up I think the issue of how much trust factors into these negotiation games. Whether you trust the person to be looking out for your best interest or not. I wonder, is that a prerequisite for good negotiation? That you trust the other person to have your interest? Maybe not, though.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, in a game, your goal is to win, so you do not have the other person's best interests. You only have your own.
Right.
Unless it is a co-op type game.
Right.
If your goal is to win, and that's how we define a game, a la Bernard Suits Grasshopper, then I should negotiate to get myself the best deal and to get you the worst deal.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Now, life is not really like that, but a game is.
Which I think that maybe is a good segue into what are some spiritual lessons we can learn from negotiation games. Some life lessons or some lessons about matters of spirit and faith that we can get from negotiation games. I know you and I have been talking a little bit about some here. You want me to jump in, or do you have some? You want to jump in? One you're dying to share?
Well, one this was your thought, but one would be that they're very creative by nature.
Yes.
So you can create opportunities.
Yeah. I think that's probably the thing that I absolutely love most about negotiation games. I at some point along the way, someone was explaining Bonanza to me, or as I was learning about Bonanza, there's, they say, okay, the very first part of the game, there's like two halves of the game. And the first half is very restricted. It's like you can't change the order of the cards in your hand. I mean, how restrictive is that? It's really, really tight. There are these incredible set of constricting rules that just make you feel like you can't breathe. But then the other half of the game it's like anything goes. Like you can offer anything you want in this negotiation. And for me, the joy of that game, but also I think maybe just the larger joy of negotiation games, is the contrast between the restriction of rules and just this almost kind of intoxicating freedom, to do anything you want. And I think there's maybe, because it is so creative, you can just, whatever your mind can imagine is something that you can offer up as a deal, and I think that offers maybe some reflection on life. I think oftentimes life can be the most fun, the most creative in that interplay between restriction and freedom, between the rules of life and the radical freedom of life. It makes me think about, like, for a river to go anywhere, it needs to have banks. It needs to have the land on either side kind of directing it. But where the river is going, the river itself is this kind of swirling, wonderful chaos. But otherwise, if it doesn't have the banks on the side of it, it just becomes a flood. And yeah, so I don't know. I guess that's one lesson that comes to me from negotiation games, that life can often be at its most fun and creative in that tension and that interplay between rules and freedom.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it sounds like you like the energy of two people coming to an agreement. And that is, like, they both feel like they're getting something out of it. And so both parties are happy. So there's a real excitement there. Like, oh, well, yeah. Like, they get excited about it.
Yeah.
Because if it's a bad deal for you, you just don't, like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Right. And then if you say, well, that's all you're going to get, that can, we've had some people get up from the table of Bonanza when it gets to that point. Yeah. So, that's
really,
yeah, that's, in some Bonanza plays. So yeah, and that kind of makes me think about, in the Christian tradition, in the Bible, some of the books, the letters written by this guy, Paul, the Apostle Paul, who often talk about kind of this contrast between life of under the law and life under freedom, and the freedom of grace or free. And I think he often seems to imply that life is kind of lived out in the meeting place of those two things, that the restriction of law is a backdrop that gives us joy in the the possibilities of freedom.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
anyway, that's one.
Right.
Yeah.
Another spiritual lesson here is really learning about others, and that if you're playing a game, you sort of learn what someone else's style is. And classic would be poker, which is a game that I played it with just the chips and not real money. So I always have to be introduced to what beats what in things. But that's a game very much, well, I guess that's not a negotiation game. You take that back, but it is a bluffing game. And that's the great bluffing game, because you can win with really bad cards if you can just convince people that you have good cards.
Right.
And so a negotiation game has a little bit of that of, well, I know that Daniel drives a hard bargain, so I make certain assumptions. Or I know when Daniel gets excited, he's about to win. So no deal, buddy, no deal. But then you may know that. So maybe you try to get a better deal by trying to invert your natural tendencies. Mm-hmm. So whenever I'm in games with negotiation, especially for playing with the family, I know which person to drive a hard bargain with.
Yeah.
Because they're probably going to win.
I was wondering about that. I mean, not naming any specifics or any people, but just in general, what are some of the lessons you feel like negotiation games teach you have taught you about others over the years?
Yeah, well, like who really wants to win and who is mostly just there to have fun, and who's I guess how. Are they playing? Yeah. I'm fading on the words here. I'm going to cut.
No, it's fine. No worries. No worries.
Are they a turtle? What's the image? Are they a turtle or are they a shark? Maybe that's. Have you ever heard those about people? Like turtles are people that draw in at conflicting. Sharks are like, rawr. And some people you really see that. I was trying to think of the animals, and I was like, lions. Oh. Sharks with lasers on their heads.
Pangolin.
Oh. So yeah, you get to see their style, and some people love conflict. I shouldn't say love it, but they get energy. They don't see it as offensive. Other people are kind of terrified. And seeing who you are, and also just knowing yourself and others, and knowing that maybe that's something to work on,
Yeah.
that there's nothing wrong with driving a good deal, as long as you're not deceiving anyone. And there can be something bad with always trying to take advantage of others. Sure.
I was wondering, can a negotiation game be fun if somebody turtles? If someone's like, oh, sure, whatever you want.
Probably not, actually.
Because I find that's one of my struggles with I can get to a point in negotiation games when I do where I do that, where it's just like, oh, sure, whatever you want.
Right.
And I'm not sure.
I tend to do that as well.
Yeah. But then it maybe not as fun. By contrast,
no, I mean, the other person may just want to win, but most people want to win well, and they kind of, if they know they can get you to do it anyway, it's not as challenging.
Yeah. I think the other contrast, another point on that, makes me think of is there have been times when I've been playing a negotiation game, especially like Chinatown, where there is a certain joy in just becoming that other person, that you're not normally, whereas normally I might turtle and say, sure, whatever. But there have been some moments where it's like, boy, have I got a bargain for you.
Right,
how about,
right.
And I know and to become this kind of this salesperson that I might not be at any other point in life, but there's such a joy in that and exploring a different part of my personality, Yeah.
And Bonanza is great because some of that, you're trying to get rid of cards that are gumming up your hand, and you may unwittingly give someone the card they really want. So along those bits of, well, no, I don't want those. And then you give them, they're like, yes. And they got the coffee bean they wanted, right? They suddenly, yeah. So it can be fun to go to the dark side, whatever your dark side is. Like,
yeah.
Well, I guess if you're a shark, it's not fun to be a turtle.
No.
So I'll take that back. It's only fun for turtles to get to pretend to be sharks.
Yeah. That's true.
Oh.
Well, I like it. Learning about others, another good spiritual lesson on negotiation games. Thank you. That's good. Another one that has occurred to me as we were preparing for this is that negotiation games or negotiating in general can be a good shortcut to identifying what's really important in a conversation or in a conflict. I think you see that pretty quickly in games. When you're negotiating, again, right? The point is points. The point is points, and so any negotiations then kind of ultimately boil down to what will allow me to get the most points and what will allow you to feel comfortable with the points that you're getting, too. And so it's a way of kind of quickly cutting through all of the distractions until you get to really what matters most. But when you negotiate in other areas of life, it can get more complex, where it's not necessarily about points. I was thinking about that example. I'm trying to think of negotiation stories in the Bible, and there's a story in 1 Kings chapter 3 that a lot of people know about. Just really an odd story where these two women come up to King Solomon, and they both claim to be the mom of this child, and this child, tragically died. No, they both had two children. I'm sorry, they both had a child. One child tragically died. One child survived. And so they both claim to be the mom of this child, and they come up to Solomon, and Solomon.
Yeah, they claim to be the mother of the living child.
Right. Yep. And so Solomon, in preparation for this episode, I really should have read the Bible and I should have gotten my source material right. Thank you for setting it straight. And so King Solomon says, well, I know what to do. Oh no, I've made Kevin angry. King Solomon says, well, I know what to do. Let's cut the baby in half, and then we'll give, this is
because that's fun.
And we'll give one half to the one and one half to the other. And And of course, the real mom goes, one woman says, no, whatever you do, don't do that. And the other one's like, sure, that's fine. And King Solomon says, aha, now I have discovered the real mother. The real mother is the one who doesn't want me to cut the child in half. And you can have
Right.
the, and, you know, I mean, it's a weird example. It's a gruesome example. It's an odd example, but it's an example, I think, of how that negotiation really cut to, not, no pun intended, cut to the real issue there, which is who loves this child like a mom would love this child, you know, who
Right.
really cares about this child. And negotiation seems to have a way of taking away everything else but what matters most. I don't know. Any of your thoughts on that? Or
No, that's so interesting. And it makes me think oddly that negotiation is partly what happens in a conversation. And so if you come to me asking a question or with a dilemma, part of it is negotiating what's this really about or what's going on, or is this a power play? And
Right.
it's reminding me of how the Pharisees would try to trap Jesus in the New Testament, the Gospels, with certain questions. Like a classic one was, should we pay the temple tax?
Right.
So they ask Jesus this, and it's a trap because if he were to say, yes, you should pay it, then it's going to tick off the Jews' time who were anti-Rome because their Roman Empire controls Israel. But if he says, don't pay it, he's going to tick off the Romans and the Jews that are more pro-Rome. So he's kind of trapped. And the way he negotiates his way out of that is to say, well, whose image is on the coin? And they say, well, it's Caesar's. And Jesus famously says, render or give to Caesar what is Caesar, which is people have continued to debate exactly what he meant.
Right. Yeah,
so it's like a negotiation by he kind of evades their question and raises another question. And then, you know, mic drop and is out. And we still aren't sure exactly what that, from what I've read about it. Like people can argue, well, you should pay it, or maybe it means everything is God's, or maybe money doesn't matter. You can take a lot of lessons from it. But does it seem to you like that moment is kind of like the Solomon story? It's sort of a negotiation of what's this really about?
It is. And as you're saying that, it strikes me that, you know, maybe so much of good negotiation involves discovering the previously unknown third option, you know, like the third way, you know, because I think we've talked a little bit about this before on this podcast, but, you know, the Pharisees again and again tried to trick Jesus into kind of this either or binary polarized kind of thinking, you know, like it's either this or that, you know, it's either you're going to pay your taxes or you're not, you know, and Jesus again and again, you know, refuses to play that kind of either or game. And in negotiating that tension, quite frequently introduces this third way of thinking about something, this third option. And negotiation, I wonder if that's maybe kind of the heart of what negotiation is, just introducing a third option into a previously
it could be
two option only.
I think that's great. And I think
system.
it can be that. I do think it can also be your earlier point of revealing what's really at stake here.
Yeah.
So the Pharisees, and of course, these are caricatures of the Pharisees in the New Testament. They doubtless were, they were not, they're kind of one-dimensional characters in the Gospels. So Gospels are describing a certain point of view. But they were trying to trap Jesus, and Jesus kind of reveals that they're trapped.
Right.
So he's sort of also,
right.
He's presenting a third option they didn't give, but he's also showing what they were really after. I think that's what reminded me of the King Solomon story.
You're right. You're right.
This, you know, by threatening to kill this baby, I'm revealing who the real mom is or what the religion is, which somebody's trying to steal a baby that's not theirs. And so one person wants to save the baby and have the baby, the other person just wants the baby. And Solomon's answer sorts out who's who.
Yeah, yeah.
So the glass onion knives out the third installment.
Yeah.
with James
Glass, an-
Bond.
glass onion.
With James Bond. I'm
Bible
Louisiana
edition.
James Bond on the bayou. I love that. It's got this French New Orleans something crazy accent. Or crazy version of it. I mean, of course.
Right.
It's a caricature of
Caricaturized.
accent,
Yeah. No, and that goes back to your
the
point.
only
I
crazy
think
accent is Daniel's.
I do.
I mean, listen to him.
I did. It's true. It's true. I agree.
Corduroy Chad.
No, I agree, Kevin. And I think what you're saying, that also kind of gets back to your previous point about negotiation helping you understand others too. That good negotiation identifies what's really at stake, which is often really these not very complicated small set of feelings that we're all dealing with on the inside,
But you may not even know what they are. They're hiding from you.
Exactly.
That's the way the human mind works. So you don't know till you talk about it what you actually.
Exactly. It reminds me of, one of the pieces of advice I've gotten as a pastor over the years that has really helped me. And I mean, it's certainly nothing
besides preach shorter sermons.
And shave off your beard and
use mouthwash
and look and be more handsome, which I can't do, and be more like Kevin, which I'm aspiring to do.
One day, my child.
Is that so often when somebody gets mad at you, when somebody directs anger toward you, and this, I mean, I've heard in the context of being a pastor, but this applies to everything in life. It's so often when somebody comes angry at you, mad at you, especially if it seems to come just out of nowhere, that very often that really has very little to do with you. That it's because there's something else going on that's very important, that probably has to relate to a very small number of potential feelings in the person, like fear or shame. Honestly, those two things. That so often
grief.
It's fear and shame or grief. Yeah, that is motivating people. And that motivates all of us, including me for sure too. It's part of being human. And that if we can, as Jesus
you're just
seems,
a lightning rod. You're just
right.
You're just receiving displaced feelings. Yeah.
Right. And Jesus seemed especially adept at kind of figuring out what those core underlying issues are. I mean, so many of the great religious traditions as well. I mean, Buddhism speaks a lot about this as well. I know, and probably other religious traditions too. But that at the heart of so much suffering or anger is a hurt child. And so
right,
that there's a hurt child.
So we have to negotiate everyone's hurt child as well as our own.
Yeah,
when we speak or when we interact.
Yeah.
I think that's really true. That also reminds me of a bit of wisdom I heard, which is when you're dealing with people in your family or friends or, close relationships, and somebody is, trying to negotiate a moment or something you all are wanting to do. One way to deal with that is, what does this look like to you? Which in a weird way is saying, what do you want? Like you want to go to dinner with somebody or whatever. What does that actually look like? And that enables someone to say what they want, because they may not be sure what they want. So tell me what that looks like.
So if somebody is in some close relationship is saying, it's like arguing for something, just that follow-up question, what does that look like to you?
Yes,
really helps
in the moment of an argument, potentially, which is kind of a negotiation. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
There's something you want, something they want. You can't negotiate till you declare the terms, which is, what does this look like? What does this mean to you? Like, can we adapt this in a way that gets to what you really want, but also makes it something that I can get on board with or interface with a way that creates a win-win.
That's a great way of identifying those core issues.
I'm not real good at using it, but I've heard of it.
What does it look like to you? I I feel the same way.
Because to your point, like we have to identify what the core issue or value is, and we don't always know it till we have to start dictating terms.
Right. It reminds me of I was looking up the etymology of negotiate in preparation for this episode.
The entomology? There's a bug. There's
both the etymology bug and the entomology. Yeah,
the negotiating ant.
The negotiating beetle is it's a hard bug to crack. But no, the etymology.
They release their bids through pheromone.
That's
I will give 5 ant baby sacks for your. And it's just the smell erupts from their pores, right? Because don't ants communicate with pheromones?
I think they do.
They don't talk. They just for chemicals. They just sweat.
And bees through wiggles, right? And so it could be a negotiating wiggle. I think we as human beings should negotiate by wiggling. I think that's what we should do more.
I do it all the time. It's just that I'm seated and you can't see it. So.
We should. Well, I think in honor of wiggle negotiation and our bee friends, we should do the rest of the podcast communicating only through wiggles.
Okay, everybody, I want you to go into your local McDonald's and order a Big Mac. And when they tell you the amount, just wiggle and see what they do. Just do a little wiggle, whether you agree to that price point.
I am going to get on the we need more wiggling bandwagon. And yes. I think that's... But,
how much for this car?
Didn't you see me wiggle? I said 700. That was a 700 wiggle.
That was a 7 wiggle. Now I'm going to sweat the next number.
That would be great. It'd be great.
What a bunch of idiots. Ants.
So
can't
anyway,
use their mouths to talk. It's so stupid.
Or it's genius. It's genious too. And it's yes,
so.
Yeah.
Their mandibles are only for eating, not for talking. That's pretty awesome. Saving energy.
But the etymology of negotiate involve. I think it's like literally like not having leisure or not being at leisure.
What?
Yeah. In other words, it's work. It's hard work. And I think that's so interesting. Yeah. So like negotiation is hard work. It's the opposite of taking it easy. Like our natural inclination is not to negotiate. And so it's hard work. It's not taking it easy to negotiate. That's really interesting.
That is really interesting. I'm having to look
jive
right now, actually.
Yeah.
Really
Let me know
curious.
if I'm wrong. And in the meantime, I'm going to wiggle and send pheromone communication through this.
Fortunately,
podcast.
the internet does not smell. This is why ants never invented the internet.
That's right.
You can't smell through it.
That's right. Yeah.
Anyway, so that's great. That's great. And another spiritual lesson.
Yes, of negotiation games.
Yes.
Do you want me to take one, or do you want to?
Yeah, you go ahead, because the number 4 on our list is kind of similar to one we had earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it is really, it is, you're right. This idea of negotiation games kind of fostering sympathy and understanding. I think that goes well with what you were saying, this idea of learning about the others. And it does, all of these are tied into each other. But, the more negotiating requires that we put ourselves in other people's shoes. And on a very simple level, we see that in games. In Bonanza, if I see that you're collecting stink beans, and by the way, I would love to find a can of stink beans in the grocery store, but I haven't found it yet. If I know that you're collecting stink beans, I mean, at a very
Nothing
basic
like
level,
a stink bean taco.
Right?
So good.
I know to offer you stink beans because I'm putting myself in a very basic level in your shoes, and I understand that you want stink beans. And so negotiation, in some ways, is good exercise for sympathy and understanding of other people. Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that, but you can't do a solo negotiating game. You have to deal with other people and sort of look at what they're after and analyze the table.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a problem with real Euro games, that there's no negotiating. So
that's true.
Looking just at your little stuff,
right,
and not paying attention to what other people are doing.
Right. Right. And yeah, and you're paying attention to what other people are doing in a way that makes you
Trying to
really sensitive
optimize
to
it for
what's
yourself.
the best for them. Yeah. Yeah.
What's best for them, but not so that they win. What do they want? And what
Right.
can I give them that will enable me to defeat?
Or at least to get what I want. Or yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah,
Well, I
or
mean,
to
if you're
defeat
playing to
them.
win, I
If
mean,
that's what,
yeah,
yeah, if it's a competitive game. Yeah. Yeah.
it's terrible to play a negotiating game and then you end up giving the person the thing and then they win. You're like, dang it.
Exactly. Yeah.
You don't want to do that.
I gave you that steak bean. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You get the assist, except for the other team, which is a basketball or it's volleyball. I think it might be dodgeball reference.
Is it okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Hockey? That's the one with the
There's one
putter,
they play on the
right?
street, which could involve ice or not. I'm a
I
little
think
unclear.
I think dodgeball is with ice on a street and a putter and a broom. I believe that's the one. I believe that's the one.
Yeah.
We need to do a spin-off a Board Game Faith sports podcast, by the way, too.
We should.
I think we have a lot of great sports insights into this. Yeah,
And the secret behind all of it is I hate sports.
Just Nick and
I mean, would you buy a ticket? You have to pay to go. Like, what? They should be paying me.
oh, don't get me started. I know. I feel it the same way. I feel the same way. It's like, I think we're going to
Ever
probably
been to a football game?
You
pay for a slice of metal that's cold with no back outside.
No.
And it could rain.
so
You're
that
like,
I could watch.
why?
I could watch people that I have no connection to throw a ball to each other with much waiting in between. I think
Well, my
probably,
back hurts and my butt gets cold.
and I could have been at home playing a board game with people that I love.
Or I could just be throwing $20 bills in the fireplace. It's about the same thing.
I think we're alienating some of our listeners here. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
No,
y'all. We love you.
While I understand and I'm with you, Kevin, I have as I know you have too. I've come to understand and know and love that that watching sports, it fulfills for many people the same thing as playing a board game for me. And so I respect that.
There's
and
an
love
uncertainty
that.
and there's a winning.
Yeah,
I can see that.
Yeah.
But
However, I'm with you, man. I'm with you, man.
there's a few of us.
And there is and that's that assumption. John Hodgman. Do you remember John Hodgman? He was a comedian.
Yes.
I love John Hodgman. Oh yeah, that's right. We talked about his book.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes of his was that this kind of captures me. He said, I don't mind. He said, I don't mind other people being sports fans. He says, what bothers me is their assumption that I am. He says it's not as if I go up to other people and say, hey, who's your favorite Doctor Who? And that just captures it so well.
So great. Right.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Anyway.
It's so funny.
We love all of our listeners, whether you enjoy sports or not, and we respect you and love you. Well, maybe our last spiritual lesson, if you don't mind, I might get us to that too.
Yeah, let's go.
Is that we've been dancing around this all this. I think a lot of us is that this idea that there can be more important measures of success than just personal gain.
Mm-hmm.
And I because if I'm honest, a good negotiation game, it feels good, but in the moment, it never feels quite as good as like me just winning without giving up anything. Because I love, but it's always like, I had to give up a little something to make this, and I'm not proud of that. I'm just saying how it feels in that moment. And I would say that maybe framing that as personal gain, and negotiation games are reminders that that personal satisfaction is not always the best measure of the best outcome, right? That interconnection and how we're interconnected matters more in the long term than kind of my own personal glory story, in a way.
And you feel interconnected how? Like where you feeling that the most?
I think we see that in negotiation games in that, they're a reminder that this game isn't just even if I want to win, they're reminding me that this game isn't just about me, right?
Right.
That we're all pulling for the same resources. That this other person has interest in their resources too, that they're wanting
Right. Right. I
to look
see. I
to
see.
look
Yeah.
good. And it reminds so, and we see this of course in a lot of religion and faith teachings. The thing that came to my mind was, when Jesus again has tried, the Pharisees, religious leaders, trying to trick Jesus, say, what's the greatest teaching, and Jesus, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself, And I once read, there's a Greek Orthodox theologian who was writing about a Jewish rabbi
Okay.
commenting on this passage: "Love your
Is this a
neighbor as
joke?
yourself." No,
Priest
it's
and a
no
rabbi
joke.
write
No.
about each other. Just check.
And they were playing hockey on the on ice and with brooms. No, but the but the Jewish rabbi in this encounter he had said something really fascinating, which has really stuck with me. That we make an assumption when we hear that commandment that Jesus talks about, which itself comes from the Hebrew Bible, but love your neighbor as yourself. We make an assumption that means love your neighbor to the same extent that you love yourself, right? As means to the same extent as in that case. And I do think there's good argument for that. And it's good to hold on to that. But as can mean something else. As can also mean love your neighbor as being yourself. And this Jewish rabbi made this point that we love our neighbors because they are us, right? That this sense of interconnection, as being ourselves. We don't love our neighbors to the same extent as ourselves. We love our neighbors as being ourselves. And that the more we recognize the importance of interconnection, the more we come to realize that loving our neighbor is loving ourselves, and looking out for our neighbor and their interest in a negotiation is also looking out for our interest in our
Everything's
negotiation.
connected. Everything, everywhere, all at once. Yeah.
Anyway, does any of that resonate with you, or what are your thoughts?
No,
Kelly?
I mean, it's really got me thinking how I've been playing more Euros, and you don't get these dynamics. Like it's very much about how do I maximize resources, and you're not connected to other people necessarily, or working with.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. I can see that it's really a different type of game.
One other kind of Euro-y game that ties into this that I didn't think about till right now, that we haven't talked about, but it's kind of negotiation. Not really, but
Monopoly.
Is Monopoly. That's right. Oh, of course, Monopoly. But Jamie Stegmaier has a couple of these games, and I'm sure others probably do too, but has a couple of these games where you are cooperatively building something with your neighbor to your right and your neighbor to your left. Mm-hmm. And then your score at the end of the game is the lower score of those two things that you are building with your neighbor to your left, your neighbor to your right. And, and so you have to want what's best for your neighbor in order to win that game. You have to, and that's just genius.
That is
I really, bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's not a negotiation. Well, I guess it's deciding when you use that strategy, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's more of a way of getting an interconnectedness. I don't know those other games, but I know Side has a bit where when you develop something, it does depend on when your neighbor takes an action, you benefit. So being aware of their boards is a way of avoiding the whole Euro trap of just looking at your board.
Jamie Stegmaier seems especially good at that positive player interaction.
Mm-hmm. I think he wants to be on our podcast.
I think he does too. He's a Missourian. Ask him. He's a Missourian. If any of our listeners out there have any connections to Jamie, let us know, please. We'd love to have him on.
Well, or cool. Jamie Oliver. We could take it either Jamie. We can have both Jamies, Jamie Oliver and Jamie Stick.
That's true. They could talk to each other about games and cooking.
And cooking.
And sports.
Right.
and bugs. And trying to think if there's any other Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx could be on as well. Jamie Farr. Oh my, that's a deep cut. Do you remember Jamie Farr from the from the 1970s.
No.
Wasn't okay. I think he was on MASH. Jamie Farr. Oh man, I'm dating myself. I'm going to stop before I give my age away.
I'm good. Deep catalog here. That's a
Oh,
record reference to LPs.
Jamie.
Jamie. Now, my
All right.
nephew had a friend named Jamie. That boy would run outside. Had a turkey chase him around the house once. My mom
anyway.
just told a story about being chased by a turkey around the house. And as they went around, they said, open the door the next time. Like the next time they come around, they're going to try to flee in.
That's awesome. Did it work?
Come around, get the screen door. I'll have to ask her. Anyway,
That's awesome.
But we have a contest.
Yes. Special announcement.
Special announcement. Ding, 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 ding.
We are so grateful for all of our wonderful listeners and followers. And we are just about to break 1,000 followers on Instagram. And in fact, as of this morning, I think we're going to give ourselves a little cushion. But
right.
But that means
bots.
Right. To celebrate 1,000 followers for Board Game Faith on Instagram, we're having a contest, and the contest is show us your Board Game Faith. And Kevin, would you mind telling a little bit, what does that mean? What are we asking our listeners to do to show us your Board Game Faith?
What we're asking you to do is get a photo of yourself at your place of worship with some of your games. So you could, right? I mean, you could be in the fellowship hall or outside or within your church or your mosque, synagogue, whatever seems appropriate to you. But we want to get something on the property of your house of worship with some of your games. You can set them up, or you could just do the box lids. Would be fine, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
However you can flex religiously and game boardy. That's what we. Does that sound fair? And we've got some demos.
We do. You'll watch our Instagram account and Facebook. You'll be seeing those demos coming out soon. This is inspired by the way, by a photograph that's already on our social media. Takuya Ono-san, with our episode with him, the cover photo for that was a picture of him in his house of worship with board games around him. That's what inspired this.
Which I'm so jealous, because between the robes, but also he had so many games set up, must have taken a long time.
I must have. Yeah. So if you post a picture of yourself with your board games at your house of worship, we ask that you include the hashtag Board Game Faith, somewhere in the posting. And we're going to search for those hashtags, and all of the pictures that are posted with the hashtag Board Game Faith by May 31st, we'll go into at the end of May. We'll go into a drawing. We're going to randomly draw for prizes. The grand prize is you're going to get a new Board Game Faith Celebration T-shirt. It's a brand new T-shirt. Plus, you can receive a Board Game Faith coffee mug, or help Kevin and me pick an episode topic and record the intro for that episode. The second prize is a new Board Game Faith Celebration T-shirt. The third prize is a Board Game Faith coffee mug.
And the fourth prize is a virtual hug from both of us.
It is. That's right. Actually, that's the grand prize for everyone. Is our love for you.
Yay.
Because we think you're all winners.
That's right. So this is through Instagram. Show us your Board Game Faith, and we're excited to see what games you have and where you choose to take a photo. And we've got Daniel and I have done this, and so let's see what everyone's doing for this. It'll be great.
Yeah, please do, and check out Instagram for more details. We look forward to seeing your Board Game Faith, and we look forward to having you back here for our next episode. We are so excited. I'm so excited to get to welcome. We're so excited to get to welcome Mandy Hutchinson from the Salt and Sass podcast. She is going to be joining us to discuss Games That Teach Part 2. Games That Teach Part 2. Yeah.
All right.
And in the meantime, Kevin, any words of wisdom for how people can connect to us?
Go to our link tree for Board Game Faith. Tree, Board Game Faith, and they can find us there. And
we'd love to see you.
Yep.
Kevin,
bye-bye.
Have a great day. Bye-bye, everybody.